Well, welcome to our New Tracks Meetup. Appreciate you coming this evening. Hope you enjoy the show. Hope you can tell your friends about us and share the link with them. The more the merrier. Before I introduce our featured modeler this evening, I want to talk about the train show that's coming up November the 21st. We have 37 slots that have been committed for the show. That's almost twice the size of the show that we had in September. And we still have some people that haven't yet confirmed or responded to me. I hope that I will get those responses in the next day or two. We're going to hold a training session for those vendors on October the 30th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, because we're going to have to be really careful about the timing on this one because we have so many people involved in the show. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be great. It's obvious that the vendors are interested in it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be getting the kind of response that we are. So with that said, I hope that you can put it on your calendar. It's November the 21st at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, Eastern Time. If any of you are new to the show tonight, I hope that you can go to our website, newtracksmodeling.com. And let me repeat that. It's newtracksmodeling.com. And if you'll register, then we'll be glad to send you an email for each of the train shows, for each of the regular twice a week shows that we do, so that you're sure you don't miss any of them. Next Wednesday, a week from today, we're going to hold our My Bill segment again. So we're looking forward to all of you bringing some models and showing us what you've been working on or what you're building. And we're looking forward to seeing you at that time. Our featured modeler tonight is Jill Kenik. She owns a 3D printing company, Acropolis Studio Models. And she and her husband, by the way, are also HO model railroaders. She is also the president of the International Association of Professional Model Builders. And she's going to talk a little bit about the association. And I think you'll find it intriguing and very interesting. So Jill, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I'll turn it over to you, ma'am.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Jim and I met for the first time at one of the Association of Professional Model Makers meetups, very much in the format that you fellows are using tonight, and started discussing possibilities, indicated that a lot of railroad modelers are interested in 3D printing, and realized that I could be a good source of information for the group. So I'm here this evening to share a little information about the Association of Professional Model Makers and answer any sort of 3D printing questions that you might be able to toss my way. And I've also loaded up a couple of pictures of our own HO layout where I've incorporated some 3D printing onto our layout. So first, let me start a little bit about the Association of Professional Model Making. Just based on the 10 minutes that I heard before this discussion this evening started up formally, I think it may be of good use to a lot of you. We are professional model makers in that we are making our living as model makers. I need to distinguish that from my perspective. My HO layout is a hobby, and it's sometimes hard to have a hobby that shares the same set of tools as a profession. So yeah, I'm always careful to try to not burn myself out of my hobby, because a lot of it's redundant with what I do with my profession. But our association includes professional members. A lot of them are corporate level. We have people working with Disney, Nike, Steelcase, Hasbro, Bose, Garmin, Whirlpool, a lot of corporate model shops, a lot of university model shops. And we also have the smaller independent model shops, which is where I fall. My customers are typically small metal goods. I'm actually trained, believe it or not, as a silversmith and a jeweler. But I spent a number of years working in the metal goods manufacturing industry. So that is really my forte. I personally have been 3D printing for close to 10 years. I've been in an independent model shop for almost 30 years at this point. But the APMM welcomes serious modelers, even if they're not professional model makers. You might want to check our website at modelmakers.org. The membership includes architectural, transportation models, consumer products, display models, museum models, scale models, engineering, prototyping, special effects. The thing about professional model makers is you find us really in any sort of product that is developed. It's oftentimes will fall under engineering. Sometimes we'll be part of the design shop. Sometimes we'll actually even be part of the sales force. So it's rather broad encompassing, and we're really deeply involved in the technology. So for the guys that are doing the narrow rail and needing cast iron parts, we have one fellow in the group that's actually a foundry pattern maker. So we do a lot of sharing of ideas and technology, and it's a very open community. So if you want to check us out at some point, you're more than welcome to.
Jill, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
The reason that I found you all, I just got lucky and was playing around and wanted to know if there was a professional association. The cost would be prohibitive for me to be a member of the association, but I understand that there is some consideration about maybe having a membership for us less wealthy people that don't belong to a large corporation that might become members of your organization. Is that true?
Jim, you've inspired us. How's that? over the past few weeks, we have reevaluated, and as recently perhaps as 2 weeks ago, we released a new membership table. You will find now on that modelmakers.org site, if you scroll about halfway down the homepage, we're rolling it out. We should call it the Jim page. There is now a free community membership where you can be associated. You'll get our newsletters. You'll be able to read through our forums. There is a retired members, a retired category where the membership fee is $30 a year now. And then it jumps up to professional model makers. So you've been part of the inspiration to re-stratify the entire membership level, because we realize the value of serious modelers such as yourself. So how's that for an answer?
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. You give us a try again.
Yeah. Jill, let me ask you this. I understand that the association just ran a contest internationally. You had 145 or so submittals to your contest from all over the world, and not one single applicant that submitted a model was a U.S. student, either high school or college. Well, that's bothersome to me, because we find in our hobby that there is a decline in the number of people that are actually building models. And if that's the situation in the professional ranks in this country, particularly the people coming up and wanting to join the professional model makers, that could explain a little bit why we're having trouble getting people to build models with us. Mm-hmm. So what's the association going to do about that? How come no U.S. students, either high school or college, wanted to be a part of your contest?
That is a mighty good question, Jim, and we're trying hard to figure that out. We had 175 entries. These are all college students or very, very recent graduates, as in 6 to 9 months out of college. They represented 4 countries. It's a challenging situation. Right now, our primary point of contact with the students is Arts University of Bournemouth. They have a very, very good modeling program that feeds directly into a lot of filmmaking and special effects programs. We are currently trying to locate similar programs in the United States. Part of our problem, one of the things I tackled when I jumped into the role of president, was to try to define what a model maker is here in the US. And it's an ambiguous term. It is not defined under SIC codes or NCIS, National Classification Standard codes, as an independent standalone profession. It's always a subset of engineering. It's a subset of design. It's a subset of prototyping, sales. So it's actually hard to get a number on who are model makers. But having said that, we are trying as best we can for direct points of contact. There used to be a school in Bemidji, Minnesota, with a really progressive model making department. That has unfortunately folded and withdrawn. We are trying through word of mouth, through increasing our social media presence, to lock into some of these kids. We've obviously determined that upcoming generation is social media literate. We have recently, within a matter of a couple of weeks, found a program in southeastern Tennessee that is offering a program of CAD design that's feeding into special effects, virtual design, and game design. And we're coming to realize that some of those kids have the basic skill set of a model maker, but they've never touched a set of tools. So it's difficult to identify. We've also struggled with trying to reach some of the trade schools and the trade programs within high schools. It's an ongoing issue. We don't have it pinned down, Jim, but we're trying to figure it out. The 175 entries from 4 countries certainly was a kick in everybody's side to find out none of those were from the US, when the majority of model makers our age are from the US. So we share your problems, we share your concerns. My family, I speak for myself, and I assume other modelers are in this position. My husband was a railroader when he was a kid. And when we had a kid, when we had a child, he became a train junkie, just like most young kids do. And that's what got David back into the railroading. And my involvement as a professional model maker easily carried over into HO scale modeling. So our son is so interested at this point. The kids just are drawn in so many directions, I think is a lot of what the answer is to that question.
Thank you.
So, what else? Where were we? Any other questions about APMM that I can answer, or do you want to just jump into what I do, and I can show you my layout and talk a little bit about the mechanics of how I get from A to B? Is it possible for me to do a screen share, Dylan?
You got it. It's turned on and ready to go.
Do I have to do anything on my end or not?
Nope. You should be able to just go right ahead and screen share.
Okay, so do you guys have my control board up?
No.
Okay. What am I looking for, Dylan?
Screen share button right on
There
the
we go.
bottom.
Okay.
Then you just got to select the screen and take it from there.
Okay. I've never driven it from this end. So. All right. Again, I've never shared my layout with anybody, so this is the first time for me on this. But my studio here at Acropolis Studios, 3D printing is a big part of what I do, but I have 4 CNC machines. 2 of those are 4-axis CNC machines. I have a professional grade laser. I have a computer-driven die cutter. I have a lot of hand skills, being trained as a silversmith and a jeweler. So through the years, a lot of this has tripped over. So I wanted to start off just trying to give you a sense of where I'm at. This is a control board that was CNC machined into laminated plastic, that this drives our system. This is just as high up as I could get to give you a quick overview of what we're doing. We're at 10 feet left to right, and we're at 9 feet front to back. We have 3 interconnected tracks here. Reversing loop that goes around downtown. Just to give you a sense, we're not thematic modelers. We're not error modelers. We just if we like something, we just put on the layout. You'll probably get a couple of chuckles. I respect the seriousness of a lot of layouts that are capturing a point in time or a place, but that's not us. We're a bunch of hobbyists working in the attic. So. Again, here's the control board. We have momentary switches and indicator lights to show us which way the switch is running, just to try to keep all this weeded out. Just a couple of close-ups here. 3D printing comes into play. Again, the layout is upstairs. The model shop is downstairs. I almost can't help myself. So basic things here, 3D printed the diner foundation, the steps for the diner. All the sidewalks and the building foundations are 3D printed. The barrels are 3D printed. Some of the pilings and the track supports here and there, if we need an odd shape and we can't come up with a good way to do it with plaster cloth, I'll run downstairs and 3D print apart. We're still underway. I don't think there's ever an end to a layout. I'm pretty sure there's never ever an end to a layout. So we just keep building and adding, and we're still at plywood in some parts of the layout. We moved here to St. Genevieve, Missouri. I'm an hour south of St. Louis from Rhode Island 6 years ago. This was in the basement of our house, and we had to make a decision on whether to abandon or to go drastic. So we took our layout and a circular saw, and we went right up through the middle, and we cut the top of the T off, crated it up, and shipped it 1,200 miles across the country. It was a little frustrating to get it rolling again. Obviously, when you do something like that, tracks don't fit together. You end up with a whole bunch of inconsistencies in pitch because the plywood warped from the heat and the transport. We stripped off all the buildings. We broke out landscaping. It was pretty traumatic. So it took us a couple of years to get it rolling again. This is mostly our winter project. So it's kind of goes in fits and starts. The barrels across the front of the yard here, the small ones, are all 3D printed. So this is what I mean when we're not sculpting up a particular error. I'm a big junkie of the 1950s sci-fi movies. So we have Area 57, we have the Loch Ness Monster. There will be Sasquatches on the layout eventually. So you'll see a couple of those things. But the space aliens here were actually CNC machined. And the spaceship was CNC machined here in my shop.
What is CNC?
I'm sorry, computer numeric control machining. It's like three-dimensional Etch-a-Sketch, Jim. It drives on an x-axis, which is left and right. It drives on a y-axis, which is forward, toward you and away from you. And those are the Etch-a-Sketch type controls. And it adds a third axis, which lifts and releases up and down on the cutting head. It's like a wood router with an extra direction of movement. And it is all computer driven.
So how is that different from 3D printing?
Okay, CNC machining is a subtractive process and 3D printing is an additive process. That's the formal answer. So with CNC machining, I start with a block of material, and using cutting bits, the machine drives it and material is removed to leave the alien standing. On 3D printing, it would take the aliens and slice them into thin layers and rebuild them. So it builds it. It's an additive process in that it adds a layer at a time upward. Historically, go ahead.
What determines which technique you would use for a model?
Okay. A lot of it has to do with the precision required and then also the scale. Historically, 20 years ago, when 3D printing began to become popular, it was not nearly accurate or precise enough for somebody working at my scale, which again was jewelry and basically smaller things. These aliens are about 3/4 of an inch to an inch tall. 3D printed, these would sort of come out as blobs. So some of it has to do with precision of cut. CNC is a smoother cut. My particular equipment, I can get a 1/1000th worth of step over out of the machines. The finest 3D printer I own gives a layer level of 3/1000ths. Just for a point of reference, this is always weird, but if a hair on your forearm is about 3/1000ths in diameter, when people say move it a hair, to professional model makers, that is a specific number, and it's 3/1000ths of an inch. So just an FYI weird trade term. CNC machining always gives you a smoother finish, but the more complex the design, the more difficult it is to develop on a computer numeric milling machine. Do you guys run Bridgeport machines or mini tabletop mills? Anybody run anything like that?
The sad part is if we have my brother Ryan in here, he was a machinist. He technically still is. He's working for us at my day job.
There you go. Okay.
He would know
it's a
exactly
machine.
what you were talking about.
Yeah. Okay. My lathe and my mill is driven by a computer. So it's all the same, but it's just a fancier version of it. But it gives me the accuracy to, for example, mill these aliens. These guys are 15 years old. I now have 3D printing has progressed to the point that I now could easily print these guys all day long. And I have a slide coming up where I'll show you some examples of 3D printing. The printing that you fellows, I'm assuming, are most familiar with would be the extrusion. They call them plastic string spitters, where it takes a spool of plastic cable and melts it and pushes it out through an extrusion head. Those are the most accessible price-wise sorts of printers. Those are great for bigger things. And I'll show you a few examples of what we did there. Again, the dinosaurs in the background are 3D printed. Having a young child with a dinosaur fascination and me wanting to explain to him what I did for a living, we worked together to put the dinosaurs on our layout. So this is an example of my dinosaur pit, and that's just another shot of the dinosaur pit. My family buys a lot of modeling components. We don't build everything. Again, it's supposed to be a hobby for me, which means it's supposed to be fun. So it's sometimes hard to break fun work versus fun hobby. These are some of the 3D prints on the dinosaurs before we painted them and installed them. And this is how the computer file started, where I actually purchased a T-Rex skeleton, buried it in a block, and then chipped the block away. The gray block I was able to actually carve into with the computer. And the T-Rex skeleton was frozen so that I couldn't accidentally chip into it. So it was actually an awful lot like a real archaeological dig to produce this. And this actually let my son do this. He thought it was a great fun and taught him to run the 3D printer to output this. This is actually the tool. This is called a Haptic Carving Arm. And it allows me to actually feel the piece that I'm working on the computer. It's a force feedback system, so I carve on the computer much like 20 years ago I was carving with flex shafts and Dremel tools. Another quick example of the block walls along here. I just needed a specific length and size, so I ran downstairs and drew it up real quick and ran a 3D print on it. And I have the CAD file, the design file here. The signpost was an example of a 3D print, just odds and ends. Buildings, I don't do buildings for my own layout simply because that becomes work instead of fun. It's okay for me to run downstairs and spend 20 minutes and put a sign together. It doesn't feel so good to spend 5 or 6 days putting a building together. So I purchased buildings for our layout. These are some kit bashing parts for the pre-slide, some window fill units. And this is the CAD file on that signpost, on the shell signpost. The shell was just a print that dropped into the 3D print. Even simple stuff like the base for the coal pile is just a 3D print that then we use the brush on adhesive and sprinkle the ballast on top of it instead of doing it the old-fashioned way, which is, crumpling up paper and put the plaster cloth on it. Again, we're doing fun, and I love the sci-fi, so we have our own little Loch Ness monster, and the rowboat was also 3D printed. Steps I have yet to install, but I always seem to need steps in the wrong size and something that's not available. So
Jill,
steps are real simple. Yes,
there we go. We're getting a lag on
Oh,
if you're going between pictures.
I'm sorry. I have bad latency on my internet. It's a clear night, so I thought we were going to be okay.
Well, no, you're coming through fine. It's like a random lag in your pictures, but it's moving ahead.
I'll slow down. Again, sidewalks, foundations, those are real simple for me to 3D print off.
Jill, let Jill,
stone wall on the right side of the tunnel.
Jill, why does it take so long to do a building?
You got my attention. There's a lot of material that can be purchased out on the web, a lot of 3D models, but building a building, you literally have to build each and every wall, each and every window, each and every piece of siding, figure out the pitch of the roof. It's almost like actually physically building a building. It would not be any different than building a locomotive. Those, you build one side, you build the other side, you build the roof, you build the back, you build the front. I would say easily on a locomotive, I'd be 20 to 30 hours into it, and I'm not sure I would catch enough detail to suit your level of model makers at that point. This is where, again, the fun in the profession. There's no whiz bang to this. Actually, the 3D printing portion of this is the simple part. It's actually getting the CAD files that are complex.
So this, hold on here. What 3D printing program do you use?
I actually, from a software standpoint, I'm working with some professional grade equipment. I use what is now a legacy software. It's called ArtCam Pro. It started off as an English program, and the folks at Autodesk bought it. And then after about 2 years of ownership, they discontinued it. In its day, it was about $8,000 for the program. The sculpting program I use is a 3D systems program. It's called Freeform. That's about a $10,000 system. I have a figure sculpting program that I made the aliens with. That is called Poser, P-O-S-E-R. That is just a couple of $100. And that's a nice program for figures, for animals. It allows you to, it's like dress up dolls for the computer. I don't know how else to put that any more politely. So okay. I use primarily a combination of those three. The actual 3D printers that I use come with what's called slicing software. I'm currently running 3 extrusion style printers, which use the spools of plastic. I'm using Zortrax machines. They are Polish machines. They have a build capacity of 1 cubic foot. The US people are now liking machines called Ultimaker. I've heard a lot of good things about those. They run probably in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. For the really fine things, the small things, which are coming up, I'm using 2 printers that I bought from a company called B9 Creations. They're in South Dakota, and they are a light, UV light broadcasts into a pool of resin and solidifies a layer at a time. And they are just super fine resolution printers, really nice machines. Those are about somewhere in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, depending on which variation of those you get. Having said that, there are 3D printers out there from $200 or $300 up to $500,000. Part of this game of 3D printing is really identifying what you need. What is it that you're looking for output? And that's really what drove my selection of 3D printers here. There's also service bureaus. If you have files available, you can certainly job out to a service bureau. The trick is finding one that will pay attention to your pieces sufficiently. Anything else on that topic that you want to talk about? I'm game. Jump in, guys.
So when you deal
I
with...
use a resin printer.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I found that what I call the wire filament type printers is not, it's got too many layer lines in it.
Correct. Correct. Which resin printer are you using?
Frozen Shuffle XL. And there's a lot of problems with it.
Could you repeat what are you using?
Frozen Shuffle XL.
Okay. As there are, yeah, they're contemptible little rascals. The B9 printer is Okay, I'm not familiar with yours. They are multiplying exponentially. When I bought the B9s, when I bought into the B9 system a number of years ago, they were one of the few resin printers. And the technology has brought the prices down, but they are tricky. You have to compensate for distortion, at least in mine, I have to compensate for distortion on the north-south. You have to have them screwed up and gated up correctly. So they're tricky. One of my main criticisms as a business on service bureaus, they stick as much stuff as they can in the build envelope and press the go button. And that's not the way I work. I fuss each piece individually, and most often, particularly with the resin printers, I print it once to see how it comes out. I make adjustments, and then I print it again for real. And I have yet to figure out how to get around that.
Is there any way to figure out why I ended up with voids in my model?
You'd have to see if you have voids in your STL. That's the first point to look at. A lot of the softwares that are more readily accessible in a prosumer version of the crossover between prosumer or even consumer don't give you what's called a watertight. An STL file is a series of small triangles that lay up against each other, or a series of small squares or rectangles that lay up against each other. My particular software takes the overlapping points and binds them together. But most softwares do not do that. They will actually allow you to lay one triangle up against another triangle, and you end up with an infinitesimally small gap, which creates a non-watertight environment. When the 3D printer sees that, it doesn't know what to do with it, so it ignores it, and it creates voids.
And now there is like 3 different technologies out. The B9, like you use, actually has a laser down there bouncing around.
Mine actually uses a UV projector light, but there are, laser is actually another technology, but yeah.
There's even another one now that uses basically a screen like your phone or tablet. But instead of being like colorized, it emits ultraviolet light.
Correct.
So
That's 3 kinds.
I actually have a printer like what TC's describing. That's actually what I started out with when I went to resin printers for my own stuff. The problem is they are maintenance bears. They are absolutely maintenance bears. No, they are. You have to.
They are. Don't live in denial.
I figured that out pretty quickly because when I first set it up, I just got a cheap desktop one that you get for a few $100.
Okay.
You have to have if your film in the bottom of the vat gets worn out, you'll have stuff stick to the bottom of the vat. If it's not perfectly on the bottom of the vat, it will stick to the bottom.
It floats.
Yeah, or it will float. Yeah, and it took a while to get it set up. I have a bigger one in my garage, an Epax X10, which came out about a year ago. And when it first came out, I'm like, I'm getting it because I need something to make some of the stuff that I have. Some of the stuff in my catalog is just kind of big, and it was too big to print in one piece on the small little desktop printer. Well, problem is we put it in the garage. We put heat in the garage just for it. And then people will keep shutting the heat off because you need to keep them temperature controlled. Otherwise, the resin does not work right.
Correct.
I actually got to the point where it got so cold outside, and while our garage is insulated without heat, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle, and the resin froze.
I also do resin casting in my shop, but one of my hiccups, and I had to argue with my electrician again and again, I have to keep my shop at a consistent temperature with plus or minus 1 degree. And that's my rule. And if you can't do it, get the system out of here and get me another system, because there's enough problems with all this equipment running. Frozen resin, overheated resin, resin that's settled out.
Oh God, it's a pain with resin printers. Don't get me wrong, I love the quality.
Have you caught the degradation of the UV light source?
Yes, I have.
Okay, there we go.
I had one. Then the other thing is the screens too, because because it heats up the screen, well, the screen will eventually burn out. So the printer I've got in my garage basically needs a full overhaul at this point.
Yeah.
And the sad part is, like I said, we put the heat in the garage specifically for it. We put a Mitsubishi heat pump in there, which as long as I kept it about 60 degrees, my printer worked perfectly fine. And as long as you kept that stable. Well, when it's 30 degrees out and you turn the printer on, it's, because I rent a room from my parents. It was cheap. It's cheaper and they like to have me. So because I finished college about a year ago. So, it's like, they're not kicking me out. I'm helping them out. They're helping me out by all means. My father did that specifically for me because he knew he wanted to have the printer in the garage just in case something ever happened. At least it's in the garage and it's not like it's going to hurt anything if something goes dramatically wrong, which is fine. I would tell my mother, hey, I'm printing, leave the heat on for a couple hours just so that way it, it doesn't freeze. And we went back and forth on this like 10 times. And then finally it froze and I just looked at her. I'm like, really? I love you, but come on. I couldn't help it. And it's like, so, I have other people printing stuff for me now just because, of that fight and the fact the printer basically needs a rebuild at this point anyway because of how much use I put it through. In the 6 months I had it and I was running it every day 24/7.
Okay.
Whether it be I was printing a prototype or I was printing parts for inventory. Not that I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because it was challenging. And if you had something go wrong, it's okay, why did it go wrong? I enjoyed that. But the problem is if you gotta, they are maintenance bears. They honestly are.
And I'll tell you my side of the story. I started off with my first jump into 3D printing was about 12 or 15 years ago. I started off with about a $30,000 printer, pro grade. They didn't have consumer grade printers at that point. And after a number of years, it paid for itself. But after a number of years, the material cost and the maintenance cost got to the point where it was my cost on the printer, if everything went well, was approaching $20 a cubic inch for print costs. So it was time to retire that. That print costs on these resin printers, these 3 pieces are up on the screen now. I'm probably at 35 cents or something like that. But some of the things that I want to comment, Dylan, in this what I call the $10,000 and under printer, you very much get what you pay for. And the more you pay, the less you have to fuss. The less you pay, the more you have to fuss.
I fully agree with that.
For me, I'm in a price sensitive market. Even though I'm working as a professional model maker, my customers are price sensitive. Therefore, I'm price sensitive. A $20 a cubic inch print was not, the machine wasn't being used because it was just, it priced itself out of the market. I don't mind fussing with my printers, but my philosophy is to have all parts on hand so I can fix any machine in my shop at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night. So I keep extra parts in here all the time. I keep extra motherboards, extra connection cables, extra bulbs. For my extrusion printers, I have one of everything, including drive motors, on hand at all times. I maintain the shop temperature. For the resins, it's not just a matter of heating them up and cooling them down, but there's a soak lag where you can't just bring it into a warm room. You have to let it acclimate to the room for a good 24 hours. So one of the things I did with my RTV molding solutions is I actually built myself a resin cabinet. It's a cabinet that's lined with insulation. And I bought about a $300 small space cabinet heater so that I could hold all those chemicals at perfect temperature. And I check it, it's plus or minus 1 degree. That may be something to think about in your environment in particular, is to actually designate a cabinet heater or cabinet space to keep your liquids at temperature, because you've got to accommodate that temperature soak to get things to work right. What else did I think about? There's also, I have a trouble with settling because I have about 6 different resins here and they often settle out. I know I have some friends that use continuous auto shakers where they strap the quart jug of material onto a tip and tilt device that just slowly just keeps it in motion all the time, just back and forth, so you don't deal with the settling out of the materials. That's another thing to point out. But I mean, you know, at the end of the day, they're phenomenal. The picture I have up right now are some prints off of my B9, and that's, there's no Photoshop games there. Those are actually the prints. They're fabulous. This Eiffel Tower is about 8 inches tall, a lot of detail in there, and that came off of the resin printer. This is quite a bit larger. This is about 1 foot tall, way too big for a typical resin printing build envelope. This works well with the extrusion printers, but again, the detail level in the extrusion printers, where I'm getting a 30 micron build layer or a 25 micron build layer, which is 1/3 of the hair on your arm. The best print quality I can get out of my extrusion printers is about 4,000ths, which is about a hair and 1/3. So again, you have to diagnose exactly what you're after on your layouts. You know, if you're looking for little parts, these DLP light printers like Dylan and I have are great. If you're looking to build architecture, I would consider getting into an extrusion printer. This is a combination of extrusions, and then the little grids and the black grates are off of the DLP. I just tossed this one in because considering the railroading. Anybody know what this is? Okay.
No.
I know what that is. That's is that from the Chicago Tunnel Network?
No, this is in the United States Capitol. This is the subway car that the senators rode in the basement between the Senate office building and the United States Capitol. They have an underground rail system. It's the Senate secret subway. It's been updated since then. It's very modern right now, but this one is from the early 1900s. You can see up in the picture the fellows in the top hat riding through the rail system in the basement between the 2 buildings. And the Capitol actually has a train station. This is the extent of the train. There might be 2 or 3 of these trolley units. And I just throw that out there because I was asked to build a executive desk toy version of this Senate subway car, but that's one of my favorite all-time train systems, is right here. And in this photograph, you can see the drive rail, and you can also see the tracks that the trolley unit runs on. It's all electric, so there's not a fume issue by any means.
Yeah, but that would probably give the health and safety guys a heart attack at this point. Open cars, underground, electric, exposed electric rail.
Well, again,
I love it though. That is quite.
It's beautiful. It was absolutely gorgeous. The new one rides like a monorail at Disney World, but it still uses the same tunnels, but it's addressed all those safety concerns. The cars are now enclosed, air conditioned. You know, there's a conductor in the car, and all the safety concerns would have been alleviated. But I just love the antique look of this. Just a beautiful old piece.
It is absolutely gorgeous.
And this is one other thing I wanted to kind of address, because I get this question from people experiencing 3D printing for the first time. Don't you just push a button and have it spit a piece out? And the answer is really no. Once the design is built, over here on the far left, you see the level 1. This was produced with a DLP printer, which commonly known as a resin printer. It has to be supported so nothing floats away in the vat. And that's the support structure that was actually required to print this piece. The second is simply the same frog with it clipped off. Level 3 is where it starts to get fun, because once you solidify the resin material, Dylan, I don't know if it's this way on yours, but it is on mine. I can hand polish the stuff. I can put it on a jeweler's buffing wheel.
Yeah, you can do that, especially with some of the resins I use, like the ABS thick, like the ABS grade resin.
Yeah, they're terrific. And then the last one is just it's been airbrushed and hand painted and hand finished, just to show, start to finish on the process.
How much trouble is it to go from step 1 to step 2?
That's just a lot of quick snipping with a side cutter. There's probably 75 to 100 supports on that frog on level 1, but I literally just get in there with a side cutter and nip them off. The contact point is less than a ½ millimeter. You're just trying, if you think in your brain about slicing the frog into multiple layers, everything that's not supported or tied down to the layer beneath is going to float away. So that's why it demands so many supports. So that's, I don't know, 15 minutes to 30 minutes to snip the structure.
Gotcha.
Sometimes the supports just break off too.
Yeah, with my machine, a lot of times when I break the support, I end up putting a divot in it. It'll take a little bit of the surface finish with it. I'm using a fairly brittle resin. You may not be having the same experience, Paul.
So far, I haven't been having issues with divots in the finished product.
Yeah. A lot of times I'll sneak in there with a fine jeweler's saw too and literally saw them off. I would rather saw them and file them than have to go back and fill a hole. But if I do have to fill a hole, I use a little resin, and I have a handheld, it's a Amazon pet urine detector. That's the right UV wavelength to solidify this stuff. So it's a little handheld flashlight that I take a toothpick and put a drop of resin in and just solidify it with this UV light. So, okay, that's the end of my slide, Joe. Dylan, if you want to take it back.
Yep, I could do that.
But Jill, is that similar to the little blue LED type things that dentists use to fix your teeth?
I can't say 100%, but I think it is. There's also an adhesive that that whole line of products, as seen on TV, somebody's selling a glue and a flashlight where you're supposed to be able to fix anything. And I think that's also the same. You have to look at the wavelength of your UV light to make sure you're getting the right one. Mine cures between 380 and 420, I can't think what the unit is, but you just have to match up the two, and anything will work. The other thing that, Paul, have you tried just taking a Q-tip with a little resin on it and just wiping it across the model to just fill in those little recesses, the build layers?
I have a 2-part resin. I filled in the voids.
Okay.
And then just sand it off.
Yeah, yeah. You could try using a Q-tip with a little bit of your resin on it, sliding it across, and then UV curing it. That works. I use that technique quite a bit. I don't like to sand. It's time consuming. It's a fact of life, but it's time consuming.
Have you tried, I'll use the term, glue 2 pieces of resin together using the resin liquid, smearing it on both parts, putting it together, and then hit it with UV light?
Yeah, I have.
Does that cure as a solid?
Yes and no. You have to deal with it. Depends on the construct of the entire piece. What happens is you have to watch how far in that UV light will penetrate. So if it's like a point-to-point thing, you have a pretty good chance of the UV light penetrating all the way into the core. But if you were like gluing 2 sheets together, it's only going to get it right around the edge, so you'll not get 100% bond. A lot of times I'll use a drop of, if I'm doing like a sheet to sheet, I'll put a drop or 2 of super glue in the center, put them together, and then come back with a toothpick with the resin and run it around the seam and cure that edge.
Interesting idea. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And then you have to file and sand a little bit. But are you guys that are using UV systems, are you curing underwater? Or are you just curing raw? Did you ever throw it in a Ziploc bag of water?
I haven't tried the water. I got the setup for it, and then I just went out and bought a bucket and put a lamp in it so I could do the water. And this was around the same time we started having, the printer's resin froze, and I just kind of parked it for now. So I know the idea of it. I know some resins actually call for it altogether.
Yeah, I throw mine. I don't know if that's just the ecosystem I work in or if it's all resins, but it has something to do with oxygen depletion. It cures faster and it cures harder.
I know there's one resin that I'm aware of. I think it's made by a company called Soraya. They actually say for the best result, cure underwater in a bag.
Yeah.
And they say it will cure to the same level of hardness if you do it right to that of a hard hat.
I think that's resin dependent, but I would
that's definitely resin dependent.
Yeah.
But it's like I had my father look at me when I told him that. He's like, "Oh, so you can make me hard hats?" And I'm like, I wouldn't necessarily trust it to save your skull, but that would make for a good master if you're rubber.
The attitude
stuff
of
with a
the
rubber mold.
The pro side of me versus the hobbyist side of me. On the pro side, I don't do a lot of experimentation. I want an entire ecosystem that works. I can just follow the directions. I have enough problems making models and doing something different every single day. I don't want to explore other resins. I have the same theory with my extrusion printers. I buy the filament from the same company that I buy the printers from, and I follow their recipe with very little temperature deviation, simply because I want to spend my time. I only get paid when I ship a product. So all this experimentation time it's really cool and it's a lot of fun, and I can't deny that I don't do it sometimes, but trying to make a living with it, I just don't have time to fool. So there's some cool resins out there. I know it for a fact, but I haven't tried to adjust them to meet my equipment.
So Joe, I'm one of those folks.
You can do a die, a brass die for injection molding.
Yeah, I CNC brass dies pretty often.
You and I need to talk after this show.
More than happy to talk to you. The jewelry industry uses injection molds from time to time when it's appropriate, which is typically when the detail is high or you're trying to do like an injection for a plastic. Primarily, my equipment is best suited to like a 2-piece mold. I have done some 3- and 4-piece molds that get complex with the assembly. Paul?
I'm here.
You're on.
What happened? Somebody else came on.
Okay.
I think Richard had a question for you.
Yeah, Jill, I'm one of those folks that likes to do the 30 hours worth of sitting in front of a design screen, but I'm not about to do my own printing. No way. I don't want another hobby.
Yeah, I understand.
So, I usually use Shapeways or one other person that I've found. I'm wondering, how do you compare? I don't see any prices listed on your website.
To be perfectly honest with you, I can't compete with Shapeways on price. My quality, Shapeways can't come anywhere near me on quality.
Gotcha.
A couple of years ago, I started the process of signing up as a vendor on Shapeways, and quite frankly, I couldn't walk across the room and turn the printer on for what they wanted me to deliver a full complete print on. So in my mind, and they have a place on planet Earth. They do. I swear they do. But in my mind, the only way they can do that is to fill the print envelope to capacity and press the go button. And what comes out the other end comes out the other end. I don't work that way. I do things one at a time. I'm known as a very, very high quality model maker. I'm not everybody's model maker. But when I ship, the product is right. So I analyze, I study, I work on how to position it within the build envelope. If there's a void in there, I can find it before I print it. So
from the other direction, do you have the capabilities that they don't have? I'm in N scale, and essentially through them, I can get 2x4s printed with no sweat. I can get etched details down to 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. Sometimes I want to use 1x1s.
yeah.
Can you print out 1x1 size objects?
Yeah,
in N scale. So.
And yeah, so I'm trying to think. I love N scale. I tried to get Dave to get into N scale, but he it's too small. It's too small. I'm totally enthralled with it, but I've never worked with it. the smallest detail I can print on my B9, I had an architect come to me for some faucets, and I think they were a 0.5 millimeter in diameter on the spout that came up and in. So when you're talking 1 by 1, 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter all day long.
1 inch by 1 inch divided by 160. So 1/160th of an inch. I don't have that number. Point 00625. Yeah, 00625.
If it's an etched detail, at that point, I would lean towards CNC machining or laser cutting.
That's actually freestanding. I'm looking at a lattice work of 1 inch by 1 inch lattice. 1 inch by 1 inch pieces latticed across a larger area.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think in real size and let
yeah,
the
that's why I'm
scale it down.
with a calculator trying to calculate where you're at. At 6 thousandths, I don't think I could free something if the math is right and that's a 6 thousandths lattice beam. I couldn't get it off my build table.
Okay.
But I could. I don't think my laser is accurate enough. I have a pretty old laser. I would lean towards CNC machining, and I mean, if you want to send me the file, I'll take a look at it. But I'd surprised Shapeways can give that to you.
Well, I'd say 1 inch by 1 inch, no. 2 by 4, yes. Which, I say that's, I'd have to go back and do the math.
I've got a conversion chart here. An in-scale inch is 0.0063.
Yeah, that's what I came up with. 0.0063 equals 1 inch N scale. Yeah, boy, that would be detail challenging. I mean, that's there. We get back to my hair scenario. That's 2 hairs.
Yeah. So I'm doing 4 hair by 8 hair.
Yeah.
And that Shapeways can do for me.
Really?
For they're not long runs. They're a scale 4 feet long. Sorry, I don't think in the production size. I only think in real size.
Okay, that's 3/4 of an inch.
Yeah, so I can do. Yeah.
Send the file. I'll throw it in the machine. I'm curious too.
Okay.
I don't think so, and that's pretty cool if Shapeways can do it. That's really pretty cool, and kudos to them. They've come some distance in the past 2 years. Then.
Yeah. So thank you. I got your contact on the web. I'll send you something and see what.
Yeah, sometimes I'm just do things to satisfy my curiosity. I can't think of how I get that off the build plate. Okay. There are some, somebody at Shapeways has got some new technology that I don't have.
Yeah, these are houses, etc. So they're pieces. They're not the full. I'm not doing a flat sheet of lattice work, for example.
Yeah, cool. I'd love to know how they're doing it.
Okay.
Send me a photograph.
Okay. Well, I haven't got that part of it, but I do have something else that is 2 by 4 that I can send you.
Yeah. I'm happy to look at it. I'll give you a straight answer on my end of things, and I'll share your fascination if somebody else can do it, because that's just cool. This technology is like old-fashioned high fidelity sound systems. It just changes so fast.
Yes.
So. Anybody else?
Jill, have you ever had your parts stick to the build plate on a resin printer and not been able to get them off without breaking?
Oh yeah. I have. Oh yeah. that's nothing.
I thought I was the only one that did that.
That's nothing new, my friend. I've got a spatula, an Ace Hardware putty knife that I honed a knife edge on. It's about 3 inches wide. Did you do the same thing?
I have a 3-inch putty knife that I ground down the edge, and then I put it on a whetstone and sharpened the hell out of it.
There you go. Sharpen it up like a pocket knife, and it's just or like a draw knife.
No, sharper than that.
Yeah.
Really a very sharp angle.
Yeah. That's you swear a little bit and you go print it again.
So Jill, let me ask you something. I'm looking at your website too, and I see you do casting. And what catches my eye is what you know, obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. You can do metal casting too, from the looks of it.
Yeah, in-house, I have a pewter casting rig. The sterling casting, gold casting, platinum casting is jobbed out. I have casting equipment in-house because a lot of times I need to deliver, my deliverable has to be in metal. So I'll 3D print something, I'll do a cooked rubber mold and do a pewter spin cast and hand clean the pewter spin cast. But go ahead, I'm sorry, what's your question?
So, I'm sorry about that. My work phone just started ringing again, so sorry about that. But one of the things that I look at with some of the parts that I've been doing is you need metal for weight. So you don't need anything fancy. You can get away with white metal or pewter. You know, obviously I'd have to send you something to look at so you actually could see what could be done with it and figure out what it's going to cost. But, you know, knowing that you could do it is helpful right off the bat, because I have one idea that, you know, I've been looking at for a while, and I'd love to get another opinion on it.
Sure.
Just saddle tank for a Bachmann Porter. The problem is those things are so tiny. If you've ever seen the Owen 30 ones, they're so tiny. You take that saddle tank off, they lose half the weight. So I'd have to send you a picture of one so you knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
But I think I still have a master that I had made up here, I think.
Okay.
And I know I've got the CAD file for it. That is saved. But, you know, I'd love for you to take a look at it to give me some thoughts
shoot
on
it to me. If not me, now here we travel back to APMM. If not me, I may be able to find somebody that can.
Oh, excellent.
You know, that's just shared resources. It's community where community will help each other out. And this is exactly the situation you guys are in tonight. In my shop, because I want you to understand why I have spin casting in my shop. I have, hang on a second, one pot of a material called 92. It's a lead free. I can't tell you what the specific gravity of the material is. It's less dense than is pure lead, but I do not have lead in my shop for a lot of reasons. So we could look at it, you know, and just send me whatever you want. I'll have a look at it.
Sure thing.
No
I'll shoot you an email, if not tonight, tomorrow morning.
Yeah, a lot of pewter casts that I've purchased out in the wild have some really nasty parting lines and flashing. I don't know what that's all about. Maybe you guys can share that with me, but is that just, it's disgusting quality?
It seems to me that when it comes to white metal and pewter kits, it seems to depend on who made the mold.
Okay.
It really does. There was a company out of England called Right Lines that for years he made his own white metal kits. And I've seen the kits. Sure, there's a little bit of flash on there, but you're always going to, I think it's safe to say with a casting out of a mold, you're always going to have a little bit of flash.
You're always, the air's got to go somewhere. So
but
yeah,
honestly,
you're always gonna have something.
Honestly, these things go together. You know, file the flash off and you're good to go. You know, It's like they're that good of a quality of casting. I've seen other kits that, you know, while they go together, after you do the prep work, you could be looking at hours of prep work instead of, you know, 10 minutes to clean off a flash.
Well, that's it, and that's where hobby and profession have this mental conflict. If I'm going to spend all that time fussing with castings, I'm going to get paid for it, and I don't want to do it. So,
no, that's fair, and that's also a question of what that even.
That's just like my initial shapeways criticism. Attentiveness to anchoring the piece correctly within the mold can reduce an awful lot of that mess. So yeah, Dylan, send me what you have. Send me the CAD file or a couple of pictures, and we'll talk it through.
All right, good deal. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to turn my attention back to the work phone for a moment. Sorry about that, but I will be off in the corner again.
Okay, cool beans.
Let me share my screen just for a second. This was one guy's idea of getting stuff off the build plate. He sharpened that edge knife sharp.
Yeah.
And then put the handle on at a 90-degree angle.
That's pretty cool though, because you could pivot it, which I think would be a good maneuver.
Yeah, you could wiggle it like this to get it under there.
Yeah. I like that.
But the one you get at Amazon is the handle pops off. But you could make your own. you can make your own out of some good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, now that you mention this, I've even taken to single edge razor blades sometimes to start the process of freeing. Again, you have to realize, as a professional model maker, I'm all over the boards. There's no such thing as like a standard density or standard shape, standard size. So I'm grabbing all sorts of tools, but I do like the fact that you pivot that seems really sensible.
Yeah, it's
And
an
that would
idea. I don't know of anybody that's made a good one yet, or at least selling it. But
Well, that won't
I
take
can
long.
imagine that you could make a better one than what you get.
That certainly wouldn't take long. That just modify up a putty knife or a sheet of steel in some manner. Huh, interesting.
Well, it's that wedge shape too in the front.
Yeah, well, so you can start to drive in, you know, into a spot that's not going to damage your print. I'm always printing on a platform. I added about an extra 0.5 millimeter on the bottom. I shouldn't say always, most times, unless I have a good flat surface to tie the print onto the build plate, I add a platform on the bottom and then lift it up on posts. So sort of in the back of my mind, taking into account if I chip something, I'd rather chip the platform than I'm going to trim off anyhow. But I do like that tool. I like the shape of that. I'll have to whip one of those up and see how it goes.
Okay, Jill, I've got a question for you. It's a little bit off what you've been talking about. I'm the exact opposite side of the spectrum. I'm a model builder that has very little, if any, knowledge of how to do 3D printing. I've got a Formlabs printer, 3D printer right over here, never been used. Because I get into Space Claims, the program I use, I get in there and I get lost. I have any recommendations for somebody that is computer illiterate when it comes to that kind of stuff?
Oh, man.
I'm learning and where to go, what to do. I find myself going, okay, I can continue to build models and do what I know how to do, or do I drop doing that and go do something over here and learn? You know, it's
so,
kind of a.
Okay, so yeah, just a couple of observations, and not to be disrespectful, but
no, please do. Your knowledge level's at 100%. My knowledge level's at 0.
I jumped into CAD roughly 20 years ago, which would have put me in my late 30s. At that point in my life, my brain was more willing to learn new things than it is now. I found that I struggle hard with new CAD programs, frustratingly hard with new CAD programs. I'm told that's not just me. I'm told other people have the same issues. Having said that, a lot of community college, you get what you pay for. Right. A lot of community colleges have foundation courses in basic CAD. Now, the problem with those is AutoCAD is a very good and very frequently taught program. For my kind of work, it's too mechanical. My particular CAD programs are more touchy-feely. If I want a round thing and I want it to dome, I don't want to diagnose the arc of the dome. I just want to puff it up and have it look good. So Autodesk has something that is kind of an obliteration of what they discontinued with my ArtCam program. It's got some real warm features to it. I can't think what the name of it is. I can look it up. It might be Inventor, but I'm not sure. And it's low enough dollars that you can get your head around it. I had a situation when I was back in Rhode Island about 10 years ago. All of my customers were using Rhino. So I brought a trainer in to teach us Rhino, which is that's an under $1,000 program. It's widely popular. And after 40 hours on Rhino, my staff and I sat at a meeting and we all decided, why would we do in 60 strokes what it would take us 2 clicks to do in our program? So you have to make sure you're getting the right program, one that works the way your brain works.
The Space Claim is what came recommended with this through the Formlabs people.
Okay.
It seems like it's a reasonably easy program, watching the tutorials and that kind of thing, but then taking it from the tutorials into real practice, I get lost. And like you said, I think it is my level of, I know what I
Learning
do.
ability.
I know what I do well, and I know what I don't do well.
Yeah, yeah, it's possible. You know, I started following CAD when I was probably 90, probably around 1990. And as a hand model builder at that point, or a designer with really good hand skills, I kept saying, why should I spend 2 days screwing around with CAD when I can build it in 3 hours by hand?
Right.
And that was my question year after year, time after time, until I finally saw a program that I could work faster on CAD than I could by hand. I'm not familiar with Space Claim. I've heard the name once or twice, but I've never looked at the interface. But I promise you the interface has everything to do with everything.
Right.
One of the programs I use is called Freeform. It's a program by 3D Systems. They have a simplified program. What's it called? It's something Clayworks or something. I took a guy, when I was interviewing the software, I took a fellow that was in his early 60s with me that had never turned on a computer in his life.
That's me.
It's a sculpting program. And I sat him down and I put the tool in his hand and gave him some basic stuff like do this, and do this. And we walked away for an hour. And I came back and the guy was asking crazy intelligent questions on how to do things. Just the interface. I lost the guy. There you are, Rob. I lost you there for a minute.
Yeah.
That was an amazing program, and that continues to be an amazing program. But the funny thing with him is we had to get up every 15 minutes and save the file for him. You know, so he wasn't a computer guy. He didn't know where to save it. He didn't know where to store it. We had to turn the machine on for him. But when we put the weapon in his hands, he knew how to perform.
If it's a square, like I can make anything out of wood. I make all of my own castings, boxes, those kind of things, barrels, not barrels, but crates. I can do that. If I knew how to show you what I do on the screen, I'd pop up a picture, but I don't even know how to do that. And it would show you the castings that I make by hand, and they're pretty good. But when it comes to anything, it's got a round deal with it, I'm out. So, really, I'm almost to the point, do I outsource this to somebody do it for me, or do I just keep doing what I'm doing?
When I first got into CAD, my first buy was Arcam Pro and one 3-axis CNC machine. And the first thing the trainer said is, this is not the answer for everybody. You got to realize building the file is 30 to 40% of the work. Running the CNC is another 30 to 40% of the work. And it's not, you're not just pushing a button or two to get it and it gets spit out. So, the old saying, which is probably not politically correct, is you got to bleed all over it to get it to work.
Right.
And until you bleed all over it, but so there's a couple of components there. The Formlabs machine is supposed to be phenomenal, but that's only a third of the equation.
Right. I'm finding that out.
Yeah.
When I bought that, because everything I looked at was the SLA was the way to go with what I was trying to get. I've got this problem of really wanting a lot of detail in things. And I don't want to settle for something that's not, I don't want any of the lines in the print, any of that stuff. So this, when they showed it to me, this did what I wanted it to do in the small scale, but I'm now to the point where.
If you don't want any lines in the print, you should be CNC machining.
Okay.
But you still have the software issue. Talk to me. I mean, I'll I don't pull punches. I'll tell you,
that's what I like.
Yeah, you could do it that way, or honestly, Formlabs is a fantastic machine, so I've heard, but 3D prints have lines. That's
right. Oh yeah, and there's no question about that.
Anything else, and CNC mills have lines too, but those lines I can get off with some 400 or 600 sandpaper.
Right.
So, it's show me what you're doing. I'll see if I have anything to say that's of value.
Okay, sounds good.
I a lot of times I supplement capabilities. I'm not looking to bump people. I much prefer, and this is gonna sound corny, but I prefer to be part of the team. So I don't care if I do like the whole job or I do a little piece of it. It's a-okay with me. So, I'll take a look.
I'm almost to the point where I'm thinking, why waste my time trying to learn something that I doubt seriously that I'm ever going to be able to master and stick with what I do well. And I don't mind paying for that extra ability. So, because if I can get a line of extra things to make, I've got all the ability to, once I get a master, to spin cast it in the whole bit. I've got all that stuff sitting right behind me. I've got I've got every laser printer, 3D
Yeah,
printer.
I thought I saw a laser sticking out over there.
Yeah, laser's over here, 3D, the spin caster's over there, the dog's over there. I mean, it's a mess here, but I've got all I need.
Yeah.
But I don't have the brain for it. So
Yeah.
I think that may be where I end up going. So
it may be. I mean, it's just you can only do so much. Stick with your knitting, and
yeah,
you know.
my expertise is in the modeling. That's
job
where I
out.
come from.
I got into CAD because I was jobbing out all kinds of stuff to a pantographer. You know, when I was paying a pantographer $15,000 or $20,000 a year, and I wanted to replace them. I wanted to, you know, regain that lost expense center. And, you know, I called up the CAD company. I said, you know, can you do, what was the joke? Can you do 5 stars in a circle or 13 stars in a circle? You know, that was a $150 pantographing job. And while I'm on the phone with the guy, he gives me 13 stars in a circle in 3D and emails it back to me. It's like, yeah, okay, that works. So it's just the fastest way from A to B that still maintains the quality is the way to roll. So
Sounds good.
Okay, I'll try to find out.
Joe, Paul Vaughn. You talked about a figure program.
Yeah.
You said you use
Poser. P-O-S-E-R. Now let me. I think the name of the company is Smith Micro, and I think the last time I bought a copy of it, it was maybe $400. It's devilish to learn to use, or it is at least for me, because it seems to operate contrary to my intuition. But I'll tell you, it's really cool if you want to do some little figures. You
can't scan in from a scanner into this program, or what?
No. It comes preloaded with a certain number of figures. So if I want to do if I need a small woman that's, I don't know, in her 30s, I can purchase a woman and bring it in, and you know, I can change her facial features. I can open her mouth, I can close her mouth, I can make her hands go up in the air or on her hips or whatever. But no, you can't scan in and modify.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I have recently bought a Sonic Mini, along with an Anycubic washing cure.
Okay.
So it's because originally I was using a Harbor Freight ultrasonic cleaner, and well, that was a mess. Yeah. And when I saw this washing cure system, it's like, oh, that makes things a lot smaller and compact and all that. And I think I got between the printer, the washing cure station, and all that, I think I got it in the size of a pizza pan for the entire workshop.
Okay.
Minus the computer. Right now, I haven't been using it that much, mainly because I'm trying to relearn basically a 3D program. I was using OpenSCAD, which is mostly line commands, because I know a little bit about programming. But as you said, that sometimes you just want to, I just want to make this curve and not try to figure out what the mathematical thing of what that curve is. So I'm learning FreeCAD. And I think FreeCAD is it seems to want to work, but then when I would turn around and go, okay, I need to extrude it or something like that, and all of a sudden it goes, oh, you can't. Or there was one where I needed to take 2 parts and be able to basically, I was taking a square and taking the cylinder, putting the cylinder on top of the square, and then wanting to remove the cylinder.
Boolean subtract, yeah.
Boolean subtract. Yeah. And it was the operation I wanted was the one that was grayed out. I'm like, wait, I need that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, that's one of the frustrations. It's like gives me all the other options except for the one I wanted.
Well, welcome to CAD. It's you know, one program never does it for anybody. You'd be surprised at the things I can't do with my system. And it's just a matter of figuring out workarounds. I mean, some of the workarounds are crazy to do. But you know, and I can get with the two programs that I have, or you know, 2+ Poser, I can get 98% of it done. But I also know who to call when I can't. Like, hey, I know you use Rhino. I know Rhino can do this particular function on wrap. SolidWorks and Rhino both can take a sheet metal form and unwrap it and show you what the flat out pattern is. And there are times in life when that is one mighty useful tool, and I have absolutely no way of doing it. So yeah, you're not different than anybody else. How's that Sonic Mini? Is that an actual that you're talking using that for cleaning, right? Or is that
the wash and cure.
Wash and cure. Okay.
Yeah,
Does that
the
work?
wash and cure. Yeah, it's basically it has 2 modes, washing and curing. Basically you have a bin that you put on there on the platform, and there's a small little propeller on the bottom of the tank.
Neat.
And
okay.
Then you can have options where you either can put the build plate in or use a basket, because the Anycubic wash and cure isn't, they don't, as far as I know, they don't have a something that connects. It's more designed for Anycubic.
Yeah.
So my frozen Sonic Mini, I actually have to remove everything off the build plate, you know, clip everything off, and then there's a basket that you can put in there. And the basket, you know, cleans everything up.
No, I just that's cool that it has an agitator in it. I used to, on my particular system, the manufacturer's recommendation is an alcohol rinse. I find that fits the models. So I went into I have a jeweler's ultrasonic cleaner that I use. That fits the models. I throw it in a Ziploc bag with 2 squirts of Dawn dishwashing soap and drop it in the ultrasonic cleaner and let that get it off. And then I drop it straight into the ultrasonic for maybe 10 seconds just to get the last blast off. But I had a lot of problems with cleaners pitting the models. I don't know if any of you guys ran into that with the resin cures, but that took a lot of failures to come up with a good solution on.
Well, I've heard that because their IPA was such a a hard thing to get because of COVID. So there was somebody that I think the YouTube channel is called Uncle Jesse's, I think, where he experimented with different things and came out with different, went to the hardware store, picked out all these different cleaners and all that, and did a, basically printed all the bunch of models, all exactly the same thing, making sure that, they all, and tried each particular one that was out.
Yeah.
And there was, I think he said the best one was Mean Green or Simple Green. I mean, Simple Green.
Okay, so he's taking the same approach. It's a good solid degreaser, more than And by the way, yes, the isopropyl alcohol was an impossible mess to try to get. Because I use that for rinse offs and stuff, and I just finally got a gallon in from McMaster yesterday. Crazy scene there, but that's interesting about the agitator, because I've had other things that an agitator would be really useful with.
Yeah, it has an agitator on the bottom, and then when you're done cleaning, you could take the container off, and it actually has a lid that snaps shut so nothing evaporates.
Mm-hmm.
And then you replace the container with a it's a small little platform that slowly spins, and then on the back there's like a row of LEDs, and it just turns around.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So it cures also. So I mean, that was the reason why I got it, because I didn't have any way to cure it.
Yeah.
After washing it.
I bought a 6-foot long strip of UV lights and lined the inside of a paint pail with them, and just did it up that way. One of those $25 solutions. Again, I'm a couple of years ago when I was trying to figure out how to cure models, and it was a little bit of a challenge. You know, this was a cheap solution, and it's still working.
Yeah, and the thing is that from what I understand, this is a relatively new thing.
Yeah, the curing stations overall are fairly new. I think manufacturers realize they can make some money on curing stations because they're a nuisance to build. Anybody else?
I built mine out of a cardboard box and lined it with aluminum foil.
Yeah. And put
just
the LED
use one
strip in
UV
it.
light in the top of it.
I went to Walmart and bought a couple of makeup mirrors. So it sits on a makeup mirror, and then I use a lid that's also a mirror. So I'm getting a lot of reflection inside the paint bucket. Yeah. But it's the same issue, Paul. Same approach.
But I rinsed off the stuff on the build plate with 91% alcohol, and then take it to the kitchen and wash it with mean green, then put it in to be cured.
Yeah.
Seems to work.
Yeah. That's the trick.
Jill, I ask everybody this. Let me ask you.
All right, there you go. Okay.
When do you know a model is finished? You stop working on it and you go on to the next model.
Never.
It's absolutely never finished, even when it ships.
Yeah.
It's always a level of sufficiency based on the price my customer's willing to pay. But
Okay.
it's never finished.
Man, do I hear that.
Yeah.
It's always something left to do.
It's like my HO layout, man. That thing is never going to be finished.
No layout is ever finished
No layout's
anywhere.
ever finished. And if you think
Any railroader ever says your layout is finished, they're lying.
they're lying, man.
There's always another room to build
I
in.
have more plans than I have years left. I know that. So
Well, you stole my thunder there, Rob.
There you go.
I was going to say that same statement. No layout is ever finished.
There's always another room we can knock through the wall and keep on going.
Yeah, but the landlord gets real
I don't
pissed
even
off.
know. I think the layouts is coming up in layers because, you know, once I finally get the last of that plywood covered up, man, then I'm just going back and it's just more details and more details and more details.
Yep. And then when you finish that, you tear it out and do it again.
Yeah. Or you take a circular saw right up the center of it and move to another house. So.
Oh, what was it? I remember Dan on his O scale layout, friend of mine. You know, we did a section in the corner, just an 18-inch wide section, city scene. He stuffed this thing full of detail, buildings, weathering, all that. A few years later, this is actually within the last year, he goes, well, I need staging. He rips that whole section out. Ooh. The best part is when I first met him is when we were putting it in. So I went over to help him put it in, and we couldn't get it to fit. So he measures it. It's like, this is the same measurement I took. And we could never quite figure out why. So we ended up hammering it in. I wasn't there when it came out, so I can only imagine it must have been a bear to take out too.
It never fit back together is the problem. One of the coolest layouts I ever saw. We used to go to the Big E show in Springfield, Massachusetts, in January, February.
Yep.
And some guy did an N scale in a Samsonite suitcase. So, and he literally built it so that he could pull a pin up and hinge the two halves together. And that was it, man. And he would just open up the end, you know, it was a big Samsonite, but it was just the coolest idea. That's where I first saw N scale and fell in love with it. But
I saw a guy do T scale, which is 1 to 450.
Wow.
In a briefcase.
Wow.
How do you see it?
How does it go?
He was younger than me. Okay.
With a microscope.
Yeah.
T scale.
I went from HO to O just because my eyesight got bad.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm an S.
Yeah.
There's a guy on YouTube called Toy Man. And this guy owns a house. I think his name is Steve, or maybe that's the other guy. Anyway, you got to go back about a year or two ago. It was a couple of old widowers that just, you know, they started keeping house together. And they were both modelers, like scratch build type modelers in O scale. And so they ran out of room in the basement. Okay, you can't stretch the basement. And so they said, oh, there's space up there. And they built a whole nother mountains and everything up on top of a steel beam that was holding the walls apart.
Did they connect it? Did they
Yeah,
up, or what was the rise versus the, you know?
I don't know how they connected it, but there's like 10 layers on the layout already.
That's
You
cool.
know, it's part O and 30,
Put the second
O and 3, O and 2, you know, whatever's O scale.
Yeah,
It's in Las Vegas.
I mean,
No, not Las Vegas. Salt Lake City.
That's interesting. I mean, it's a fun hobby. But we go in fits and starts. It's you know, the yard and the gardens take precedent in the summer, and we usually go upstairs in the attic in the wintertime.
So Joe, let me ask you something. I've been to the same Springfield show you've mentioned. I go every year. Obviously, who knows if it's happening this year because thanks COVID. You know, so do you remember there was a layout that somebody brought, and it fits basically in a giant case. It's an O-scale module, basically what it was, and the guy brought it from England.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
this
yeah,
was
they
like,
do lots of layouts over there.
there was like 3 or 4 years ago. It was ON2. He did, you know, modified some Bachmann, a Bachmann 490 to have outside valve gear, and re-gauged it. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is beautiful. And then the guy tells me where he's from, and I'm like, wait, you brought this all the way over here?
Yeah.
Wow.
No,
And he's like, well, yeah, I heard about this show. I wanted to bring it and show off. And I'm like, you deserve a medal, because this is like a distance traveled with your display.
that you have to plan that build for sure.
Oh, I know. It's designed to fold up into a giant case. So
But to go with O scale on transportable, I mean, that's amazing.
We had guys that came down from Canada, and they've been doing it for a couple of years in an ON30 layout. The Dirty 30 gang is what they call themselves. They've got like biker jackets with the logo on it. They great group of guys. They invited me to hang out with them last year, and I'm like, yeah, I'll go. You're inviting me. Of course I'll show up. So
it was I think I can beat your long distance. There was a guy who brought a display layout from New Zealand to the Pacific Northwest.
okay, that probably takes a distance medal right there.
You bet.
I mean, you're crossing the Pacific Ocean to get there. That is something
Well,
else.
the funny thing is that he did it on an airplane.
He fit that on an airplane? Oh boy.
Can you imagine?
Paul Hobbs?
Jill, let me ask you this. Where is 3D printing going? What do we see in 5 or 10 years?
Oh my God. Just a second. Excuse this demo. But I get excited about this kind of stuff. Guys, check out my new sneakers. They have a 3D printed sole on them. I mean, it's incredible. Housewares. I work with a company that has trouble finishing. They print steel faucets, bathroom faucets. It's starting to become less of a product development tool and more of a production tool, and I think that's really exciting.
Is it because of the size that, you know, with the bigger pieces, that it's easier for them to 3D print things to replace products that they've made in metal and the like previously?
Yeah. These faucets have a lattice structure to them. The center is hollow, and they have a lattice structure, and the water comes up through the lattice. So it's like magic. The water's coming from nowhere, and that's taken advantage. Just a second. Let me see if I can grab something else. I keep this around, and it's a little discerning, but if you understand the backstory, okay? This was from scan data from a seriously injured child. The surgeon wanted a warm-up model before he undertook the surgery. I mean, this kind of thing is changing the planet Earth.
Yep.
He could practice on that 3D print. I've read stories that they're printing biocompatible materials. Just a really amazing story about a kid that needed a new windpipe. And they 3D printed a strata that the body could grow onto, and it would self-dissolve. I mean, where's it going, man? Where isn't it going?
Right.
There's just all these incredible stories about how 3D printing is changing the planet.
There was a story out. They have this little thing. If anybody knows what a TINS unit is, you usually put it on the outside and it stimulates the nerves. Well, this university figured out how to put the TINS unit inside you.
Oh, cool.
And then they found out that everybody's been wrong for the last several centuries. The spinal cord is actually intelligent. And they can put this little TINS unit in below the level of injury, and someone like myself can learn to walk again.
Cool.
And you know, they 3D print this little bitty thing that fits your spinal cord, not your column, but your cord inside your spinal column. They get in between, you know.
Yeah, it's incredible. I don't know. I mean, there's just no limit, Jim. The answer is there's just no limit. And I mean, I feel insignificant in the big picture because there's so much exciting things happening out there with 3D printing.
Well,
on the other scale, they're doing for $10,000, they're 3D printing entire houses in 48 hours.
That's cool. I've heard about that. And honestly, the powder printer, my $30,000 powder printer, ran on a system of, it was, for all intents and purposes, it was a really fancy plaster of Paris and a really fancy spray glue that came in on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was self-supporting. It was 100% self-supporting. And at the end of the day, you blew off the uncured powder and reused it. And at that time, they were building the little utility buildings, like telephone exchange stations, and they could print all the wiring tubing in it, and holes where electric needed to enter the building, printed in concrete. I actually sold my 3D printer to a college PhD guy that was doing his project on cement printing, with the idea of being able to scale it up. So that's
what they're doing.
Have you guys seen these metal 3D printers running?
I haven't seen them running. I've seen some of the results, which makes me kind of sit there and go, that is cool.
I mean, that's the lasers are in there and the sparks are flying. And I mean, and that's cool. And the limiting factor there is the grain size of the metal. But as technology improves, the grain size is going to reduce and the quality is going to get better. So
well, that's kind of the thing with technology, isn't it? I mean, look at where we started with the idea of computers. I think back to a fire control computer on a battleship. Well, that took up a whole section inside the ship that you just couldn't use because you needed to be able to figure this out. Now you look at something like my iPhone, and I've got more computing power than that fire control computer, which is kind of scary because if somebody developed the program and the plugs, you could just run it off an iPhone. But then you look at everything hits a point where it just develops faster and faster and faster. Mm-hmm. Computers are the perfect example. Look at where we've gone in half a century as far as computers go. Yeah. Computers that used to take up a huge building and couldn't do more than what a calculator does. Now you've got so much computing power in your pocket, it's not even funny. It's the same thing with 3D printing. When I first started doing my stuff about 3 years ago, technically 2, but it started at the very tail end of 2017 in like November or something. When I first started looking at 3D printing, the resin cost was through the roof, or at least what I felt was through the roof. In the last 2 years, the resin cost has come down dramatically. Yeah. which is great. And you've got a bigger variety of resins out there now too, which is even better. And what they can do with some of these materials, some of them are just, like I said, you could have like I said earlier, you could have a resin that's as hard as a hard hat. Like I said, I don't know if I would trust that to save my skull on a construction site, but it's the capability. We're getting there. Eventually, you know, the only limit I can see to 3D printing is the human imagination. That's the only limit. You know, you could build anything within your imagination, and if you can't think of it,
but you can't forget that it's you've got to hit that first piece. You have to be able to build it.
Right.
It's not to push the button and it spits it out. Yeah, it's not.
You have to figure out the design. You know, make sure it'll work. But if you're just limited by human imagination, I mean, look at what some people on this planet have done.
Yep.
You know, I maybe it's because I'm a humanist or whatever you want to call it. But look at how far the Industrial Revolution started. What, 150 years ago? We went from
more now, but not much longer.
We went from basic hand tools and, you know, from an agrarian society to a fully industrialized one in less than a century. And in the 50 years since that, you know, somebody from 150 years ago would not recognize where we are now. They would just be dumbstruck by just how far society has come. You know, we put men on the moon, for crying out loud. You know, in a century, we went from, you know, water wheels and all that stuff, and we went from that to putting men on the moon inside of in a century or so. Once we really got going with it and we started figuring out, you know, how to make use of all these natural forces, how to make use of steam, how to make use of gear, how to make stuff.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the computer example, ENIAC was built right before World War II. It took up a 5-story building, a city block square in Chicago.
I can believe it.
It was all vacuum tubes. That's where the term bug in your computer came from, but we'll go to that. Yeah, we won't go into that. There was a whole crew of ladies that, after they'd figured out the programming the night before, flipped switches all day long so they could run one calculation.
Now you look at it and you could run a complex calculation in an Excel spreadsheet.
Freaking watch.
Yeah, you could do it on something the size of your watch now. It's amazing.
I ordered an M2 hard drive for my CAD computer today. I paid $52 for it.
How big?
Its transfer rate is 3,200.
How big is the hard drive?
Take a second. It's about the size of a stick of RAM. It's a 500 gigabyte.
Oh, okay. That's what I was asking. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Just the way I'm set up here, I put my software on one hard drive and then my data streams over to a NAS. But I just couldn't believe I could buy that thing for $52.
Oh God, I remember like when I bought my first solid state drive like 3 years ago, it was like $200. And I went and bought another one that was even better than the old one for the same price, and it holds like a terabyte. Where the one I got for like $200 holds like 250 gig.
Yep.
Yeah. My first hard drive was 5 1/4 full height, 20 megabytes.
Yep.
For $250.
You know,
I got one for you. Do you remember the 11-inch floppy disks? I'm probably really dating myself now.
Yeah.
Okay, we got one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
I remember finding one when I was at school, and I'm like, "What is this thing?"
My uncles all worked for IBM, so I saw a lot of that stuff.
Oh, you saw a lot of cool stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Like little donuts wrapped around intersecting wires for memory.
Yeah.
64K.
Oh, the ferrite core.
Yeah, ferrite core, 64K. Not megs, not gigs, K. And crazy. There was a guy a few years ago when he was 17. wanted to build a nuclear reactor in his garage. It kind of scared his parents.
I remember I had to read a book on that kid.
Yeah, so
project?
I don't remember his name right now.
I remember he was in Michigan. He did it in the shed out back.
Yeah.
And when the feds realized what he did, they just kind of went, "Oh crap!" And they just like had hazmat all over the neighborhood. They were like interrogating him as like a terrorism investigation. He's like, "Well, hold on. The science is out there. I was just trying to see what I could do with it." And he made a working reactor the size of a 4x4 box. And he made the control rods himself. He did this back in the 80s. And I remember reading the book because we had to we had a selection of books we had to do for summer reading, which I never really saw the point of. But I picked that up, read through it. I'm like, wait, this kid's a madman. I like it.
There was another kid that did one for a Boy Scout project. But this guy is incredible. He's still only in his 20s. He did this in like late 90s, early 2000s, and it wasn't any reactor. He ended up doing it at the university in Utah where he went to the exceptional kids school. They have like 20 kids in the whole school. And so he met this college professor and he said, I think it's safer if we do this in the lab. Guys, he built a fusion reactor.
I can believe it.
It's about the size of a roll-around computer cabinet, a rack.
I can believe it.
And now
the sad part is
yeah.
You look at, like I said, you come back to where we as a society have been. What is it going to look like in 150 years from now? And if any of us got plopped there 150 years from now, are we even going to recognize where we were?
No.
I don't think we will.
The first steam engines were in 16 something. They weren't very efficient.
Yeah, I know the ones you were the big giant kettles on wheels.
And the first when was Trevithick made his locomotive, taking it back? I think
1793, I'd like to say.
Yeah, and before that we already had steam powered factories in the early 1700s. By 1800, England was a completely industrialized society. It was all steam and belts and heavy, big, huge buildings.
Stuff that we look at now and we go, that's kind of cute. We look at that now and we go, oh, that's kind of cute. Well, seriously, look at how far we've come.
Yeah.
Dylan, where are you located?
I live in Massachusetts, a little town called Leicester.
Take a run sometime when life is improved out there, when you can get out to Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. You'll get a big kick out of it.
I'll have to take a ride down there. I know of the mill. I went. Yeah. I think my grandfather took me there when I was like 2 or 3. Pretty
amazing place. Good history story.
But yeah.
What kind of mill is it?
It was a textile mill. They built socks and fabric, water powered. It was like the foundation point of the New England Industrial Revolution. The water wheel ran on the Patuxent River, and weaving machines, all belt drive. They used to use animal fat for lubrication. But at a historic site, they had the original machine room set up, and a lot of that brilliant ancestral technology that got us started on the Industrial Revolution. Some of the weaving machines, just the element of danger in how they would run those machines and how many people they would crush in the course of a year, changing up the spindles. It's just a really cool story.
A lot of people don't know the history of the Mason Machinery Company, which became the Mason Locomotive Works. But he worked on and even invented some of the cotton machinery and the looms that were in the very revolution you're talking about. But his big claim to fame is as a untrained engineer in his very early 20s. Most mills have a bearing at the bottom of the power shaft, which is vertical, not horizontal. And it's how do you, I mean, that bearing was made out of wood and it wore out like every so many months, you know? So you got to take the whole thing apart. He invented a bearing, still wood, but it was the shape of the bearing and the bottom of the shaft, and it floats on a little bit of oily water.
That's cool.
Some of the bearings that he himself installed are still running.
Wow.
This was in the 1700s. So we're talking how many years ago?
That's wonderful.
And there's no computers. He didn't even know how to use a slide rule.
But he did it.
But he did it. He also took Farley's design for the locomotive and turned it into the Mason bogie and got rid of all the steam leaks in the articulating steam lines. So the guy knew what he was doing.
Seriously.
Well, listen, guys, this is going on about 2 hours tonight. So, Jill, we don't want to keep you forever, but I hope you've enjoyed this.
I have certainly enjoyed this. It's been a real pleasure talking with all you guys. I think we're like-minded here. I hope you'll check out the modelmakers.org. I think there's value in associating the communities. And it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed the talk. I'm wearing out. My day started at about 7 a.m. this morning, and I think I'm running out of steam here. So,
7 a.m. where?
What's that?
7 a.m. where?
Central Time.
Okay. I'm in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, Jill, thank you so very much. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope we can hook up again and reach out if there's anything I can do, any questions. I'm just a phone call or an email away. So I'd be happy to do it. Okay, fellas. Jim,
thank you. Talking to you, Jill.
I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
What is the qualifications for retired?
You
I don't know, 3 times.
I think it's serious modelers would be who we're after.
Yeah.
It's you'll chat out with the executive director and she'll kind of qualify you that way.
Okay.
But
and she's a neat person. She's easy to talk with and deal with. So,
I missed where that question came from.
Samantha, right?
Yeah, Samantha. But who asked the question?
Oh, me.
TC.
I'm a young guy here. I'm not quite 60, but I've been retired for 30 years because of injury. So that's why I asked. What does that mean by retirement?
Sam, and I think I think any of you guys would enjoy the community. I think it's it's a good contributory community, and I think you have the mindset to be part of it. So we'd welcome you. But hop on the website and just get a hold of Sam's email address and shoot her a note and see what you can do. Okay.
Jill, thank you. Good to see you. Appreciate the time.
Okay, come on. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this tonight. I know it was a little different than what we normally do, but the association I've enjoyed very much, and I've learned a lot. All I do is ask questions because I have no idea what I'm doing, and all this stuff is just brand new to me. And I understand about trying to learn programming. That's beyond me. Forget that. I tried and gave up. So buying a printer, that doesn't make sense because I can't do the programming. So, but I am learning about it and what's doable and not doable. And that's been helpful to me in my modeling, trying to figure out if this is a technique that can really benefit me. So I hope you enjoyed meeting Jill tonight. And I do hope you'll at least investigate their association. Next time, we've got Rick Hunter of Hunter Models joining us. And I think you'll really enjoy meeting Rick and talking with him. So I hope that you'll come back and be with us then. I do want to mention one other thing. Some of us were talking earlier today about trying to do something called a bull session or talk about it. And I'm wondering what you all would think about that. If we simply had a meeting where it was kind of open for anybody that wanted to talk about something and see where the conversation goes.
Well,
Works for me.
isn't that kind of what we were doing after Jill got done? You know, every subject under the sun.
We did that type of meeting today.
And frankly, I think that's good that we can do that kind of thing, you know, rather than just have one person come and talk to us for a long time. What amazes me is that every one of the shows that we've had, and I think this is our 21st show, if you can believe that, has taken off on a different road than where it was supposed to start from. And I think that's great. Whether there's a separate show about talk about it or not, I'm not sure we need that necessarily. But I think, you know, toward the end of each one of our shows, I think that's what it basically comes down to. And that, I think, is encouraging, and I'm all for that.
By the way, Jim, I sent you some stuff in the chat, but a couple of resources we can talk about for your farm, guys.
Okay, and I don't get the chat, so if you'll just send me an email.
I'll send you an email.
Thank you.
There's a lot more grain hoppers and cattle cars than I thought we had in the S-scale community. Some of the stuff is rather obscure, but anyway.
So Jim, before we break for tonight, who do we have coming on Saturday?
Rick Hunter.
Okay. So we've got Rick Hunter joining us Saturday, and yeah, just
Hunter Models. He owns Hunter Models.
Hunter. Okay, just so I can make sure we get prepped for it.
Yeah, and I need that data for the stuff.
And Dylan, I think that's all you need to put out the flyer and so forth.
Right. So, all right. So yeah, if you could send me, if you just shoot that to me in an email real quick when you get a chance.
Yeah, I'll do it right now.
Just so that way I could do the flyer up tonight.
Yeah.
What I am gonna do is